Alright, this is Uncle Jam, and we are back at it with another video here in the Custom Models series. In this video, we are going to be going over the Block States files, and how to use the Block States JSON files to our advantage, and how to edit them to make them do what we want to change some of the blocks in the game. Let me head into my resource pack folder here. If you don't know how to get here, check out episode 1 in my resource pack series. And I will show you exactly what I'm talking about. So we'll head into Assets, into Minecraft. Now there's 3 folders within here which contain JSON files. The first one being Block States. The second one being within this Models folder. You'll notice we have Block and Item. Both of these 2 folders are the remaining 2 folders that contain JSON files that can be edited in order to change things within the game. So I'm going to be making 3 videos which will go over the formatting for all of these JSON files and what exactly we can do with each of these JSON files. And then after that, we'll be getting into specific situations such as 3D models, such as better leaves, and also cool GUI things you can do with the item models and things like that. So stay tuned for those. They're going to be some pretty cool videos. However, in this video, we're going to be going over Block States. Alright, so let's head into Block States here and get into it. Now what Block States do is they basically tell the game what model to implement depending on the block's state. So as you can see, we have a giant list of JSON files. So I will pick one here that we can start to analyze. So I'll pick andesite.json. I'm going to open it up with Bracket Software, which is a free software for Mac and Windows. Check the link in the description. And we see some JSON code written here. Now, if you're unfamiliar with JSON and some of the terminology I'll be using in this video, be sure to check out the JSON tutorial I have, which will give you a quick overview and instantly make you a master of what's exactly going on here with all of the JSON files and formats. So, like we covered in that video, JSON is a giant web of objects here. Now, in this particular one, we can see one object, and that is variance. The string for the object is variance, and the value for that object is another object, which has a string of normal and a value of another object, which has a string of model and a value of andesite, which is another string. So now you may be wondering, well, how did they get to this, and why did they put this here for andesite, and what does it all mean? Well, I've created a little bit of a web, which I'll pull up on the screen, which will help you and show you all of the rules when it comes to making these block state JSON files. Alright, so let's start at the top. We can see we have block states, and then underneath we have root file. Now that basically is just the root file. So this andesite.json here is the root file, and so that is the top of the web. Now you can see it branches off to the left and right with 2 red lines. Now what the red lines means is either or, so we can either go to the left or the right. Now at the end of every single one of these lines are little groupings of text. Now those groupings of text tell us information about the JSON file. So let's take, for example, the first grouping. We see variance, which is within quotations, and underneath we see string : object. Now, every single one of these little groupings of text are JSON objects. They represent details about a JSON object. And the reason for that is because these JSON files are massive groupings of objects. So that first little grouping there with variance and underneath we see string : object tells us information. Now the information it tells us are what kind of object it is and what the string value is. Now the string value is at the top within the quotations. So the string value is going to be variance in the case of the first one there, and what type of object it is written underneath the string in the small text separated by a colon, and we have string and object. That's the type of object that this object's going to be. So hopefully that'll give you a bit of a rundown on how to read the tree diagram over there. Basically, every single one of those things at the end of the line, the little clusters of text, are information about the object in question. So you can see heading down the left side, we get to variants, which is string object. And we keep going down the line to figure out what the next object's going to be. And we see it's a blocks variant, which is a string object. And we can see we have that there. Now, a blocks variant, you'll notice I put that in green. The reason that's in green is because a blocks variant is dependent on the block. So we'll notice here we have normal. And that's because we are in andesite.json, and andesite only has one variant of the block. It can only be in one state, and that's normal. It's always in that state. It's always in the normal state. And so what this is saying is, in the normal state, apply the model. If we keep going down the chain, apply the model andesite when it's in the normal state. So that's what this one is saying. Now you might be wondering, well, how do we know all of the different states of various blocks? Because every block has its own individual set of states. Now to figure that out, there are two ways. The first way is to head onto the Minecraft wiki page. I will link that below, and it will show you a nice list of every single block state for every single block in the game. The second way is to head into Minecraft. Here I am in Minecraft, and push your debug screen and highlight over the block in question. So for an example, we'll highlight over glass. Now on the right hand side of the screen at the very bottom, we see Minecraft : glass. Now there's nothing underneath that, which means glass only has one state, and that's normal. Slime. Now let's look at the stair. Now notice Minecraft : oak stairs. Then we have facing east, half bottom, and shape straight. I hope you can see where I'm looking. Basically, all three of those values together define this block state. So right now, the block is in the state of facing east, the half is bottom, and the shape is straight. So that's going to be the block state. Once again, we highlight over slime, we see there's no values. That means we would use normal, because there's only one block state, which is the normal state. Let's take a look at the anvil. We see we have damage 0 and facing south. So let's take the anvil as an example. So this is one of the states. If I were to place an anvil like so, we see the damage is still 0 because it's still a fresh anvil, but now it's facing west. So that's a different state of the anvil. So let me open up the anvil.json here, and we can analyze and view all of the states. So there's anvil.json. And as we can see all of the various states here. So we see once again our first object, which is variance as the string, and then we see another object. Now you'll notice on the tree diagram I have a blocks variant and an S in brackets. That's because it could be a list of blocks variants. So in this case, we have a list. We have the first variant, the second variant, and so on down the line. So we see the first variant. Damage 0 facing south. We continue down our little chart there, and we see we have a bunch more options for the objects coming up. We see we have a black line pointing towards model, and then 4 blue lines pointing towards some other parameters. Now the blue lines mean optional, so blue lines are optional parameters. Black line is required. So as we can see here, when damage is 0, it's facing south. Apply the model anvil undamaged, which is we notice the model object is string. Now the second string value, the value for the model object, is anvil _undamaged. Now you may be wondering, what exactly is this? Well, this is a path to the model. So this is pointing to another JSON file which contains all of the model properties for this individual block. Now we're going to be going over how to edit the various model for each of these in the future tutorials, but we see basically that is what the block state is doing. Once again, it's telling the game in every state of the block which model to apply. So that's what that's doing. Now, this is pointing to a path. It's actually pointing to the block folder, which I showed you earlier in the video. I'll pull the path up on the screen there so you can check out where that's automatically pointing. The reason it's automatically pointing there is because that's where all the models are stored. And instead of having to type in the entire path every single time, it just is jumping you automatically to that folder. Alright, so let's move on now to the optional parameters in the blue line. And we can see actually one of them already being used in the Anvil here. We notice that when the damage is 0 and it's facing west, it's going to apply the model Anvil undamaged, and we have a comma. Now you want to make sure you separate all of these values that are on the same level with commas. So the next we have y as our string, and the value is 90. That's because if you notice, y is a string and a number object. Now what this is doing is it's rotating the Anvil model across the y-axis by 90 degrees. That's exactly what this means. So the value is in degrees value. So x is the same, as you can imagine, except it's rotating across the x-axis. So let me just add in a little value here. I'll put a comma. We'll put in our quotations. We'll type in x. And we'll make the value 90. There we go. So now what it's going to do is when the damage of the Anvil is 0 and it's facing west, it's going to apply the model Anvil undamaged with a rotation of 90 degrees across the y-axis and a rotation of 90 degrees across the x-axis. Let's head in game and see what that looks like. So here we are in game. Now we'll notice this is the block state. The damage is 0 and it's facing west. So as soon as I reload my pack, we notice that it now changed to rotating on its side. So that's exactly what those do there. Alright, let's remove that. So that covers the X and Y optional parameters there. Let's now cover UV lock. Now UV lock, whoops, make sure I include my quotations there. UV lock basically tells the game whether to lock the rotation of the texture that's being applied. Now the default value is false. We'll notice once again UV lock is a Boolean object, so true or false value. So UV lock, the default is false. So let's head in game and check out what false looks like. Basically, we are going to be examining the rotation of the texture. So let's place down a few anvils in different rotations here. So there we go. So as we can see, let's take a look at the texture nice and close. You see there's a little square of lighter pixels there. We can use that as a bit of a marker. So we'll notice the texture is rotated this way. As the anvil rotates, so does the texture. We can see now it's up there. So we see the texture's rotating with the anvil, which in this case is preferred. Now, if we set UV lock to true, it's not going to rotate the texture with the anvil. Now, keep in mind, we only have UV lock set to true for the block variant damage 0 facing west. So it's only going to affect this center anvil here. Reload the pack, and we'll notice that the texture now didn't rotate with the anvil because UV lock was set to true. So that's what UV lock does. Now that brings us to our last parameter, which is weight. Now weight allows you to specify a weight on how often the model will show up. If you have more than one model specified for the same block state, then it will allow you to set how often it will show up. Now, I have a video actually already covering this from the Resource Pack series, which I'll link on the screen. It goes in depth on how to use this parameter. However, basically, it's a string number object, and you just specify given weights, and it's all relative. So if I gave this one 1, and I gave this one 10, well, this one is going to show up 10 times every time this one shows up once. That's how the weight parameter works. Once again, if you want to check an in-depth video on that, be sure to check out that episode linked up in the top right-hand corner. And that basically covers the right-hand side. So I hope that makes sense to you guys, and that will give you a bit of insight into the left-hand side. That'll give you a bit of insight into the left-hand side of the chart there. Let's cover multi-part models now. Alright, so let's head down the right-hand side path. You'll notice we get to multi-part. Now, that is the string value for our object, and the type of object it is a string and an array. So as you can see, I've opened up the fence.json here. We have our string value as multipart, and the value here is an array. Now, multipart blocks are blocks that are made up of multiple block models. So not just one single block model, but it's made up of more than one block model. So you'll notice, branching off from multipart, we have when and apply. Now, because this is an array, we have to have an array of something. Now, you'll notice they're tied together. That's because it's an array of when and applies. Now, that may seem confusing. Basically, when is going to define a block case, a block variant, when to apply a specific model. So the best way to do this is to just look over here at the example I've pulled up. So let's check out what our first value in the array is. Well, notice our first value in the array is here up till the comma. And what it is it's apply, the apply path, which is the object is going to be, so it's going to say apply the model oak fence post. That's what this one's saying. You'll notice it followed down the path. It went from multipart to apply, and then it went to model. It didn't use any of those other optional parameters there, which, if you notice, are actually the same from the other side, the left-hand side, underneath a blocks variant. So it only used the black required path. So we see apply, we see model oak fence post. So what it's saying is always apply the oak fence post model. No matter what happens, always apply the oak fence post model. So that's our first object in the array. Now let's see what comes next. We have a comma, and we have our second section in the array, and we'll notice it's a bit longer. It consists of when and apply both. So we'll head over to when, and we see it's saying when north is true. Now what is that? That's a blocks variant. So you'll see what it did there was it went over to when on the tree diagram, and then it took the left-hand path from when over to a blocks variant, and that is north and is true. So when north is true, comma, now it includes an apply. It says apply the model oak fence side with UV lock as true. So that's what this is our object here. When north is true, apply the model oak fence side with UV lock as true. That's our next object in the array, which consists of when and apply. So hopefully you guys can see that. And then we'll check out our next one, which is another when and apply. When east is true, apply the model oak fence side. And now we have those other parameters, which we already went over. Y90 UV lock true. This is a bit tricky to explain. I hope you guys are following. So that basically covers everything on that multipart side already, except for the OR option coming from when. Now, in order to view that, let's head over to the redstone wire. So here we are with the redstone wire. And we'll notice that it has multipart coming up here as the option. So we're heading down the right-hand path, and it goes to an array. Now, let's check out our first value in the array, which goes up to this comma, and we see it's when and apply. So it went down the when path, and so it has when. Now, inside of when, we see it goes to the OR path. And OR is a blocks variant, or list of blocks variant, and in this case, we have a list of blocks variants. So what it's saying is when. Now, what OR means is when any of these are true. So if one of them is true, then apply this model. So not all of these have to be true. Only one of these things has to be true in order for it to happen. So let's check it out. It's saying when north is none, east is none, south is none, west is none, apply the model redstone dot. Or if north is side or up, east is side or up, apply the model redstone dot. And so on and so forth. So that's what OR means. Now, these block states are important to have a basic understanding of. The best way to get it is you can check this video out as you have, or go and mess around with these things yourself. Change some values, add in things, see what happens within the game. Now, remember that multiparts consist of multiple block models, and the variants consist of the single block models that change depending on the block's state. So I hope that tree diagram can help you guys out. Hopefully this video made some sense. Stay tuned for the next 2 videos coming down explaining those JSON files, and stay tuned for how to apply these into many different circumstances.